Today's episode of the Get Your Comic On podcast may contain mild spoilers for the movies, shows, comic books, and games that we're discussing. And, if you're lucky, there might be some PG-13 language. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hey, super friends, it's Neil, and welcome back to another brand new episode of the Get Your Comic On podcast. Thank you to everyone who tuned in last week for our return. We loved reading your comments and hearing all of your wonderful things that you are looking forward to this year, be it movies, comic books, shows, everything that you are looking forward to in 2025. But most of all, we were really feeling the love bringing the show back, so thank you very much. This week, we are doing something a little bit more traditional, and we're going to be talking about some upcoming movies and shows that are coming out in the next couple of weeks. But before I tell you about what they are, I need to intro this week's, or in fact, the first of this week's guest hosts, because there are two, but they are joining me in two very different sections. So, first of all, you will know him from his reviews of Harley Quinn comics and also everything from the Something is Killing the Children universe, which is a series of comic books I really need to start reading. It's Michael. Hey,
Hello.
how
Thank
are
you for
you?
having me. I'm really good, thank you. Excited to
You
be
don't have
here.
to say that. You are part of the family. You are part of the hosting family of this show.
The Bat family, as it were.
Yeah. And so we are also being joined a little bit later this episode by Boy Wonder. Martin is coming back, although not on camera, albeit, to review something with me as well. So Michael and I, we are going to be talking about Harley Quinn. Season 5 has just started in the US. One episode is already out as we are recording this. The second episode will be out as this podcast releases. But we're going to be doing all things Harley Quinn, the animated series, which is very exciting. I hope you are excited too.
I'm thrilled. I'm so excited.
And then Martin and I are going to be talking about Star Trek Section 31, which is a streaming movie, which is going to be on Paramount Plus from the 24th of January. And we're going to be talking about Prime Target, which is a new Apple TV series, which actually the first two episodes are available to stream now as you are watching and or listening to this. But we have seen the whole season and we're going to be chatting about our thoughts on that one. But before we get to all of that, before we get to Boy Wonder, Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn,
Oh, I'm so happy that this show is back. I
me
love the
too.
program.
It's so good. It's probably one of my favorite TV shows around at the minute. I
Yeah,
think this season's probably the best it's been, which is really exciting.
I totally agree with you. So I wouldn't say that there's been a bad season of this show yet. There's not been a season that I've not liked overall. I've had a few issues with maybe seasons 3 and 4 where it's not quite been the show that I fell in love with. But I
Yeah, I
feel
feel
like
that.
we are back. Something about season 5 feels like we are back and it's at the best it's ever been again.
Yeah, completely agree. I think like the whole like season 2, 3, and 4 journey where Harley's like exploring if she's a villain or if she's
Mm,
a hero. I feel like it was good, and I really enjoyed that exploration of Harley's grey area.
yeah.
But yeah, this season feels a lot more like what I want from the show. And it has that like tone and comedy, and it just feels like they're really going for it. So I'm
Yeah,
all in.
I really I don't wish to speak ill of anyone that's worked on it, but there's been a bit of like a behind the scenes change a couple of times.
Mhm.
And the showrunner who was there during sort of season 1 and season 2, who was away for kind of 3 and 4, is now back in charge in season 5. So I don't know if it's
Oh.
something about his work that I really gel with. Dean Laurie, who also is showrunner on Creature Commandos, which will encourage you even more to go out and find yourself a copy of Creature Commandos,
Mhm.
is back showrunning Harley this season. And I feel like without being detrimental to anyone else who's worked on it because they've put their own stamp on it, I feel like his version of this show is my version of this show.
Yeah, I feel that. It feels very reminiscent of the comics, which sounds really trivial to say, but the recent
Hang on
Harley
a minute. You are the expert because you are the one who is reviewing the comic book at the moment.
well, there you go. Yeah, the recent run of Harley comics, I think like the end of season 4, but mainly season 5 feels like that comic, like the like comedy of it, the tone of it,
Yeah.
just how Harley is as a person and her relationship with Ivy feels
Yeah.
a little bit more reminiscent of the comic that I really like. So it's really fun and really cool to see.
So you've seen the first episode of season 5.
I
Uh,
have.
I have seen the entire of season 5. So I promise I will not spoil anything. but yeah, that you have really only just begun to scratch the surface of how much there is in this season, which is really, really exciting. Um,
Yeah.
I what I wanted to ask you, because we've never really spoken about it all that much, is what is your kind of Harley journey? What brings you to Harley Quinn? What do you love about her that's what you love about the show?
I think my relationship with Harley as a character stemmed from being a kid and watching Batman the animated series and seeing her like come to life there.
Yeah.
And then I think like I didn't really see her for a very like maybe a brief bit of time.
Hmm.
And then I started playing the video games, like the
Yeah.
Arkham Asylum video games, and obviously she has an entire DLC where you
Yes,
can
of
play
course.
as her cause chaos as Harley. And I remember playing it and being like, I used to love this character. I need to get back into it because she's just so funny and self-interested and
Yeah.
she's just on her own like wavelength. So I just kind of dove back in and just checked out what she'd been up to. And I've just stuck around. She's been one of my favorite characters ever since.
Love that.
And it's a comedy of it. I think her character kind of similar to Deadpool, and it's a bit
Yep.
sacrilegious to compare it to the MCU slash Marvel since it's
No,
DC. But
yeah, totally. Sorry, not to cut you off. I
no,
actually put that in my review because I do feel like, um, this season particularly because you've had that journey where she's been the hero last season with the Bat family and kind of
mhm,
come to terms with that. I'm not really a hero. I'm not really a villain. I'm just in it for me.
yeah,
Does feel very Deadpool, and I feel like that's not something to get right very easily. Um,
no.
but they do.
Mhm.
Sorry, I cut you off. Please finish.
No, you're completely right. I think I always say like I would define it as self-interested. She's
Yeah.
not good, she's not bad. It's up to her when she decides she's into it or not, or what she'll do. And I think the show does a really good job at bringing that to life, which is really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. And so obviously this season we're moving to Metropolis. We're out of Gotham, which I think makes it feel super fresh this season because although a lot of the supporting cast has come with them, so we're not getting
Mhm.
rid of Bane, we're not getting rid of Clayface. They don't worry, don't worry. Better listeners at home, they are still there. They're still, maniacally causing trouble. Um, it does give the show a really fresh coat of paint to be in a very different city because Gotham's very dark and very grainy, and I feel like Metropolis is very light and white and bright, and other words that rhyme. Um, but did you get that sense from that first episode that it suddenly feels like a bit of a fresh start?
Yeah, I think when it's towards the end of the episode, they mentioned that you can't break the rules in Metropolis, like you can't break the law. And it felt like a really good setup to be like, how are Harley and Ivy going to break the law? What are they going to
Yeah.
do to like flip Metropolis on its head? And it did feel like different. It completely tonally feels different.
Yeah,
The one thing I found really funny actually is in the episode when they move to Metropolis, the way the camera pans from Gotham and just goes over the water to Metropolis. It was so funny.
yeah, yeah.
It really cracked me up, and you can feel the difference. Like you can see the difference visually, but just like the way the characters are and what they do, it just feels really fresh.
I kind of feel like it moves the show from being Batman adjacent, which is very difficult to not be Batman adjacent when you've got two Batman villains. But
Mm,
well, like you will know from reading the Harley comics, she isn't confined necessarily to Gotham, although she might live there a lot of the time. She doesn't
mhm,
only interact with Batman characters, she interacts with people from all across the DCU. And we've obviously seen lots of people from across the DCU in this show and in the Kite Man show as well. Um, but this feels moving them out of Gotham felt to me like they were saying this is like Harley and Ivy take on the entire DCU rather than just being very Gotham based.
yeah, I got that sense as well. I think it just opens the world up a bit more. Like we know that DC's universe is quite expansive. Like it
Yeah.
goes from Gotham to Metropolis to space and beyond. And I think the
Interesting that you
show,
could say that.
you could say that. And I think this season opens the door to what more DC's universe has to offer for Harley and Ivy, which I think is
Yeah.
really cool.
And obviously, we're also introducing, there's lots of Superman elements to introduce.
Of
This
course.
episode I loved because I was freeze framing and spending so much time in the Superman Museum looking at all the Easter eggs in the background. There's so many different suits and other stuff in there, which I love because obviously, there's been a lot of Batman Easter eggs and stuff while we've been with the Bat family and all of the stuff in Gotham. Um, and then we introduce a bunch of supporting characters as well. So, like, you might meet Perry White, you might meet Jimmy Olsen, you might meet Brainiac as well. Please tell me you introduced Brainiac in that episode and I didn't just spoil something. Um,
Yeah,
voiced by
yeah. At the
Stephen
end,
Fry. Stephen Fry.
it was
Like,
like the cliffhanger at the end of the episode. It's like, oh. the
Mm.
cooking.
Really, really well voiced by Stephen Fry. I thought that was really interesting casting.
Yeah, it's
Things that you're going to see
interesting.
from him are very interesting as well. It's all very, it's a very Harley Quinn way of approaching that character, which I think is very unexpected.
One of my favorite things that I liked about the first episode that I thought was really funny is how when Harley was in Gotham, she was Batman's therapist, and in the first episode, she becomes Superman's therapist, kind of.
Yeah.
And I just found it really funny that she's kind of got two of the Holy Trinity. I feel like we need Wonder Woman in here now to like,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
That'd be
Harley's therapist to all of them.
yeah. Make a move over to Themyscira for a little while. I mean, I
Yeah.
gave this, I did give it 5 stars. Anybody that wants to read my review of kind of it's spoiler light for the whole season, it's up on over on the website now, www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk. But if there was anything that I would have wanted a little bit more of this season, it probably would have been Superman. So I will choose my words very carefully because obviously you haven't seen the other 9 episodes, but I feel
Mhm.
like he disappears for a lot of the season for an in-story reason and comes back for a very in-story reason when it needs him later on. But I would kind of maybe have, if there was anything that I would have done slightly differently, is maybe had him be as present as Batman has been in previous seasons whilst they've been in Gotham. But at the same time, that's kind of a wish list thing. What you will actually like, you won't watch it and think, "Where's Superman?" Like, bring him back. He's not like a glaring omission or anything, but I would have been interested to have seen more of how they might have interacted if he was around a bit more.
Yeah. I can see that. The one thing I did find really funny, which is kind of to your point, is how Superman was kind of replaced by AI in the first episode with all these little robots floating about. It felt very 2025, like on brand, on topic.
Yes, it did, and plays, which I'm guessing is maybe why they've used Brainiac because they've got the Brainiac like triad of dots, which I was like, oh, I think I know where this is going. But yeah, it plays very well into contemporary society.
It does.
What are
What
your
did you think
feelings
too?
on? Sorry, no, go
Sorry.
on. I was about to say, what are your feelings on Lena Luthor, who is
Well, that
a
was
major
exactly what I
part?
was about to ask. The great minds think alike. Um, I loved her. I thought she was really good. Aisha Tyler, voice acting
Genius.
legend, Archer. Um, yeah, I thought it was really good, and she did a really good job at playing her cards really close to the vest. You don't know if she's good, you
Yeah.
don't know if she's bad. She's a loofah, so you immediately like guards her up. She's
Yep.
not to be trusted. But I thought it was really interesting, and I thought she was a really good character as well.
I could say so much, but I won't. Yeah, and she plays it so well right across the season as well. And what I will say is you will get to see her interact with her brother as well, which is fun when it happens. And
Oh.
for those of us who are sad enough to remember it, I will also credit Aisha Tyler for being Jennifer Love Hewitt's best friend in season 1 of Ghost Whisperer till they dropped a plane on her. Um, that
Deep
fact like
cut. That's a deep cut.
that. Very, very. I know, again, so you've obviously only seen 1 episode, so this is probably a very difficult question to ask. But
Mm.
actually, I think you did say you kind of feel like it could be potentially one of your favorite seasons. But where is it kind of sitting in your how much I love Harley Quinn as the show?
I think in one episode you cover a lot of ground with Harley and Ivy, and it was quite fun
It's
in the
definitely going
sense
to
of
please the fans of Harley and Ivy together, I think.
yeah, I think my one critique of them as characters together as a couple is it's usually a lot of build up, and then once they get together, it's now what? You're left in this sense of what are they going to do?
Yep.
And I think this season, like, it's giving me faith that they're going to kind of address that and find a way for Harley and Ivy to navigate being in a relationship and exist as characters at the same time.
Funny
So
you should
yeah,
say that. Yeah, because I think one of the patterns, which is probably maybe why I've been less of a fan of season 3 and 4, because obviously they only get together at the end of season 2. You get them like she runs away from the wedding with Kite Man and they drive off into the sunset together. In season 3, you get that eat bang kill tour. Um, and the show does immediately do that thing where it's like, let's find a way to add conflict so that they're not necessarily on a smooth platform with each other and it's not all plain sailing. And then in
Mhm.
season 4, although they are quite happy together, you've obviously got Harley with the Bat Family and you've got Ivy with the Legion. So they then add that conflict in that they can't talk about work with each other, which I felt like again put conflict between them. So one thing I will say that I really appreciated about season five is they actually just allow them to be together and be a couple and work together and find a way to work together that's mutually beneficial, helping each other and supporting each other. So it's a nice season for them being together and the show not going, well, we've put you together, but now we're going to rip you apart. And that's not to say that there won't be a little bit of conflict or some high stakes, but yeah, for me, it's really nice to just see them allow themselves to be together for a whole season.
Yeah, completely. I feel like it's just really exciting because, like you said, up until this point, they've always had something like not allowing them to be a proper couple. And
Yeah.
obviously, doing the City Sirens with Catwoman, or kind of where, kind of when, we'll find out.
I thought that was
Um,
quite funny. I wondered whether that was a plot point that the showrunner who's left between season four and season five maybe wanted to explore, but when the showrunners changed, whether that's why they then decided to wrap that up in that little flashback and then jump forwards a year. I wonder if that, I don't know, that might have always been the plan. I would have happily explored that because I think it's a great concept from the comics, but I just thought it was interesting that it set that up and then just stepped away from it really, really quickly.
yeah, I didn't know how far I could spoil it, but you're completely right. You
Oh,
step into
I
it.
mean, yeah, the first episode is out, so that happens very, very quickly in the
Fair.
beginning of the first episode. If you are annoyed that I've just spoiled that for you, then you missed my whole speech that plays at the beginning of every episode where I say there will be spoilers for the things that we are talking about.
There you go. But yeah, the jumping into the sirens and them disbanding because of
Yeah.
the self-interest again with Harley and Ivy versus Catwoman. It was really funny. And the Enchantress nod was really funny too, like the way it kind of played into the Suicide Squad film, kind
Yeah.
of, and it was kind of
Yeah.
like a jab at that. It was really well done. But
It's
yeah, I think it's
go on.
cool to see them be a couple.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's needed. You can't always break them up because it just becomes too repetitive, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it takes away from the relationship if they're always having patches of together and they're not together and working on it, but it kind of ruins it. And you want them to at least have some time to just be an epic power couple.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you think about like we're obviously both in relationships. It's not always like that.
No.
Sometimes there are good times. In fact,
Yeah,
often they are good times. Um,
most times.
Granted, neither of us are supervillains or, married to them. Not that I'm aware of anyway. Maybe. Um, yeah, you
Can't
kind of,
tell.
if you want people to identify with it and to actually sort of well, not sympathize with it, that's the wrong word, but if you want us to relate to what's happening on screen,
Yeah.
then we kind of need to see them just exist and be themselves, which is much needed, I think.
Yeah, completely. Like in the episode, they explore kind of like your social life death when you're in a
Yeah.
relationship, and they're just sat in bed and it's got no bra on, it's just comfy clothes, they're eating crappy food and watching crappy TV, and they both like look at each other and go, "We should probably go out and do something." That is so true to a real relationship.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it was the best I think I've ever seen them as a couple, which sounds
Yeah.
really sad. The fact that
Yeah.
them in bed doing nothing was the best I've seen them.
And then I love that
Um,
they basically have driven Gotham into the ground just to drive home the point that it's like we should move because they're walking around and it's like chaos everywhere. And it's like, you know what? I hate it here. Let's go.
Yeah, it's them sat in bed and you could just see through the window just giant rats fighting and buildings blowing up and like, should we move? Like, yeah, you probably should.
Funny. Right, so I one more question on Harley Quinn for you before we move on, which
Mhm.
I can't answer myself because I've seen it. Tell me or tell us what you're hoping for the rest of the season, whilst I figure out what I'm going to say next because I've seen it.
What am I hoping for the rest of the season? I'm hoping the comedy goes even further. I think the one thing of the show that I love the most is its ability to self-deprecate on DC, but then also take jabs at other IP and franchises that exist in a really good way, not in like a bitter way.
Yeah,
So I'm hoping the comedy keeps going. I'm hoping the action continues to one up itself because I feel like season four did a good job at
yeah,
driving home the action. There's also a lot of twists and turns in season four, like certain deaths and characters. You know,
yes,
I feel like there was some big reveals there, so I'm hoping we get some more twists and turns because I think that's a really fun part. And then I guess my final thing I really hope the show continues to do which is done throughout all of the seasons, so I'm just hoping it continues it now in Metropolis, is Easter eggs. I think my favorite thing with the show is looking in the background, like,
Yes.
I can see this and I can see that. And it's so nerdy and silly, but it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, more of that.
So my verdict in my review was after four incredible seasons, Harley Quinn returns this week feeling fresh, rejuvenated, and ready to create chaos. With Dean Laurie back in the showrunner's chair, season five is perhaps the best season yet. It's dynamically written and sees Kaylee Cuoco's Quinn embracing her place in the DCU outside her home of Gotham City. 5 stars. My one thing that I will end Harley Quinn on is, and I don't know anything. I have no insider information on this, so please just listen to this as words. I'm not spoiling anything. If this is the end, which I don't know if it is or it isn't, in the streaming age, a lot of shows don't really make it past 5 seasons. Uh, I would be happy with how it ends this season. I really, really want more because I think it is in a wonderful place to do more. But if this is the end, I would be happy with this being the end.
That's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, it just. And with that, then we will throw over to me and Boy Wonder, who I managed to drag away from his PhD for a few minutes, so that we could talk about Star Trek Section 31, which is a brand new streaming movie starring Michelle Yeoh, which is coming to Paramount Plus a little later this week. Here's what we had to say about it. As Star Trek enters its 59th year as a franchise, Paramount Plus is looking to do something different this year and is bringing us the very, very first Star Trek streaming event movie. Now, in a way, there have obviously been plenty of Star Trek movies before. There have also been plenty of two-part episodes which have aired on TV as kind of TV movies. But this is the first time that the franchise has ever produced a entire story with a cast purposefully brought in for an event like this. So Section 31 picks up on the story of Emperor Philippa Georgiou, played by Academy Award winner Michelle Yeoh, last seen in Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, when the ship was thrust into the future and it nearly ended her life, so she travelled back in time. Where we find her in this film, it's several years later, I think possibly even several years after where Strange New Worlds is currently set, and she is on the outer fringes of the galaxy outside Federation space, kind of living and hiding where nobody knows where she is until Section 31 catches up with her again and sends her on a mission which has lots of connections to her past in the mirror universe and forces her to kind of confront and live up to who she is and who she was when she was the emperor of the Terran Empire. It's directed by Olatunde Osunsami, who worked on many episodes of Star Trek Discovery, and it's written by Craig Sweeney. Alongside Michelle Yeoh in the cast are Amari Hardwick. There's also Sam Richardson, Rob Kaczynski, Casey Roll, Sven Rygrock, James Haruyuki Liao, and Humberly Gonzalez. And we had the chance to watch this a couple of weeks ago. Actually, we got sent a screener by Paramount Plus, and then I was also lucky enough to attend the UK special screening, and we got to see Michelle Yeoh in person as well. It's streaming from tomorrow as you are listening to this, if you're listening to it on the day it's released. So that is January the 24th, available globally on Paramount Plus. So, Boy Wonder, making your triumphant return to the podcast in almost a year. First Star Trek event movie. Let's start at the beginning. What do you think about this 100-minute, or kind of 90-minute to 100-minute format for a Star Trek story?
I like the idea of it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think if you've got a good story and you've got maybe a character who is already established, like Georgiou, who maybe... Okay, I guess there's two ways to look at it. One, Michelle Yeoh is now an Academy Award winner since she first appeared in Discovery, so I guess her time is probably a little bit more precious. But also, I don't know that Section 31 is a series. I don't know that you need... I suppose you could do a 10-episode event like Picard, but as a series like, say, Discovery, or Next Generation or Strange New Worlds, I don't think Section 31 works. So I think when you've got a scenario like that, but you've got a good story to tell, I think as a format this could work pretty well.
I agree.
And so let's talk about the story of Section 31. It feels very much like, I keep saying this to people, anyone who's kind of asked me about it, I've said, it feels like Mission Impossible in space. It doesn't feel very Star Trek. It is very much set in the world of Star Trek. There are lots of recognizable elements of Star Trek, but it is very different tonally because we're outside the Federation. We're not even really seeing any Federation ships. We're not seeing any Starfleet uniforms. We're very disconnected from everything that we would know of as Star Trek, and doing this action adventure type story. What were your thoughts on first watch about a very different kind of Star Trek?
I It didn't land for me, I would say.
Okay, why didn't it land for you?
I think I
Too
liked.
different?
Yeah, well, I like Giorgio. I liked her backstory. I liked learning more about that. I just think everything around it let it down a bit for me. Maybe it was too far removed from Star Trek.
And I suppose that's going to be, I think, a really big point of conversation for people in watching this, because I enjoyed it. I think it is an enjoyable action adventure set in space, but there is a kind of a story and an argument about whether Star Trek this far removed from the Federation and from Starfleet is still Star Trek. Now, I am very much part of the All Trek is Trek movement, so yes, it is, but I guess it's how well and how much you can connect with them experimenting with other types of stories that step outside Starfleet. Is Star Trek without Starfleet? And I mean, technically, she is part of Starfleet because Section 31 is part of it. But we're not playing by the general rules. We're not on a very recognizable type of ship. So, yeah.
I'm fine with all that. I just didn't like the surrounding cast.
Okay.
The characters slightly irritated me a bit, and I found it very jarring. They didn't really mix together as a group of people.
So something for me, which I think... So I'm giving this 4 stars in my review over on the website. But something that doesn't necessarily work for me is I still feel like this is almost like an extended pilot. And I think there's a lot for me to enjoy in the action, in the adventure, and especially Giorgio, because I think Michelle Yeoh is amazing. And similar to you, I thought the backstory was nicely done, particularly in the opening with the young Giorgio, where I think Miku Martineau does an amazing job of playing the young version. But then we get slightly lost in trying to set up a group of characters who could appear in a sequel or something else. And I think if you're doing a movie as a movie, I suppose if you're thinking about Mission Impossible, if you go back to the first one, although it does set up characters who appear in other movies in that franchise, it didn't feel like that's what they were doing. And I think there are certain scenes in this, like the very final scene of the group together, kind of toasting themselves and championing their next mission, that almost feels like, that makes it feel like a pilot. And that was something you said about it feeling very piloty.
Yeah, I almost felt like, oh, this is the start of a series where we're going to go next with it, but then like, oh, we're not really going anywhere with this. This is it.
Yeah, doesn't quite have an air of, it doesn't quite finish itself off enough and round itself out nicely enough to feel like a standalone project. It feels like the beginning of something else. Which, yeah, I think that's my biggest issue. I don't have many issues with the story itself. So you just touched on the supporting cast a bit there. Was there anyone that you did like in that cast?
I like the main man from 31.
So Amari Hardwick,
Yeah.
that's Alok. Yeah, I think he plays very well against Michelle Yeoh. I like the dynamic between the two of them. It feels like there might be a bit of a romantic-y type spark there, but the story doesn't play out that way. They're more, I feel like it's almost played in a way that they challenge each other.
Yeah. I wasn't quite sure how the rest of them fit together. It's almost a bit like a really bad Suicide Squad.
They're a bit disparate, aren't they? So you've got Sam Richardson, who plays Quasi, who is a shapeshifter. Really great visual effects on his shape shifting, which we'll come on to kind of effects and stuff in a minute. You've got Rob Kaczynski as Zeph, who is a like a sort of weird body dysmorphia mech type guy. Looks a bit proto-Borg, but not Borg because they don't exist yet. Sven Rugrok as Fuzz, who is a robot, kind of android Vulcan with a tiny little... Oh, don't say little, he'll be offended. Weird microorganism inside him. And then you've got Casey Roll as Rachel Garrett, which is a name that will spring in the back of the mind of many Star Trek fans because she is a character from all of about 15 minutes of screen time in Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise, where she is the captain of the Enterprise C, which is a nice little connection to Trek Legacy. Any of those others that you did like the character or felt worked as a character themselves, just not necessarily in the group?
They probably all worked individually. I just felt that they were all a bit too overly hyped. Like Rachel was too Starfleet.
She's very Starfleet, isn't she? It feels like the blueprint for her character was she's got a Starfleet stick up her ass and she needs to learn to relax a little bit, which she does across the arc of the film. But I know what you're saying.
It just feels all a bit too much. Like the Vulcan android with the tiny alien inside of him just felt too slapstick. I could see what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But it wasn't landing for me.
I like the inclusion of Rachel Garrett. When they announced that Casey was going to be playing that character, I thought, this is interesting. I don't quite know how this is going to work. And that obviously is the signifier that the time period has moved on slightly, that she's in Starfleet and she's a lieutenant, and by the end I think she's a lieutenant commander, so she's on her way to captain. And I do like Quasi, and I do like Zeph. I am not sold on Fuzz as a character, which could partly be down to the really odd choice of an Irish accent. But I think Sven does a good job with what he's got in the script. But there is an awkwardness to bringing them together because it feels like they're supposed to have been a team already that is then thrust around Giorgio when she's brought into the mission. And I don't feel like there's enough of a connection between people.
No, and it's a very different 31 than we've seen in Disco as well. It doesn't fit for me.
Okay. I do think it feels very different as a type of 31. It feels like a 31 that would fit in a Mission Impossible action adventure movie better. So I feel like they flexed what 31 does a bit to fit this. So you mentioned there that you liked the backstory of Giorgio and where that goes. How about how that ties into the kind of weapon and the apocalyptic thing that they're after? How do you feel about that journey to get to that?
I mean, I could probably do without it, to be honest. I mean, just give me more
Giorgio.
Just
give me 100 minutes of Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was... If you had more of that, more of her being the sort of anti-hero...
Yeah.
And sort of playing the facade that she doesn't want to help, but she does really want to help. So
yeah.
give me more of that.
Yeah.
And lose the noise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, let's talk about the production, because again, this is the first time we're seeing streaming Star Trek on this scale. So this is bigger than a show, not theatrical, so still very much made for streaming and TV viewing. What did you think about the production? Let's talk about let's do visual effects last. Let's do like practical stuff first. So like set design, costume design. How did that all work for you? Did it feel bigger than a show? Did it feel like a TV movie event?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't fault any of the production of it at all, or how it was executed. That was all excellent, really.
Same with the visual effects?
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with you. So obviously when you watch a screener like this, for those who might be tuning in for kind of the first time, when we get to watch this kind of stuff at home before it's released, we don't often get to see necessarily the kind of 4K streaming version, or even sometimes like a full HD version. Sometimes we get a scaled back one, and it will often have something stamped across the middle of it. But in this case, I think we saw a pretty high quality version of it, and I was impressed by the scale and the scope of the whole thing. So some really big set designs. The station that Giorgio is on at the beginning and at the end of the film has some really big locations. There is a bar that is quite a central focus across the film that is quite deep and rich as a set. we see lots of different parts of that station, which I think are also really, really well made. And then there's also the planet that they're on for a period of time that I can't now remember the name of, which has a base that they're sort of stuck on for a little while, which I think was also quite well built, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then visual effects wise, it really impressed me. So the opening flashback in the mirror universe, we see this huge ship kind of lurking over the top of where Giorgio grew up as she is going through her final trial to become emperor. And it really hammered home that this is Star Trek on a bigger scale. You're nodding, people can't hear you nod.
Yes, I agree.
Were there any moments that you thought didn't work just in terms of the visual effects or anything? Because I was really impressed. There was a moment when I watched it back on the big screen at the premiere that felt a little, and I'll give you the irony of it in a second, that felt like it didn't work quite so well. But on the whole, I was, again, seeing it stretched onto a bigger screen, it still looked really impressive.
Yeah, there was nothing that jumps out at me like that. Well, that was hinky.
So there's one moment, and it really surprised me, is when they are in that station and they're having their fight on the moving platforms. I suddenly thought, oh, the background looks a little bit hinky. Turned out it was filmed on the volume. So it wasn't even like a bad green screen moment. It was actually just that they used the big LED screens for that whole sequence. And I mean, it didn't look bad. That was a moment that I thought, oh, okay, this isn't perfect. But on the whole, I was really impressed by pretty much everything I saw on screen. I think that's all we need to say about Star Trek Section 31. I think, me personally, I'm giving it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It does feel very different, but I enjoy the versatility and the experimentation that the producers are trying to see what works with Star Trek in the streaming landscape, where necessarily series might not always be the way to go. I think there are a couple of issues with the story that mean it doesn't quite land that 5th star, but I would definitely recommend it. Definitely recommend, if you enjoy seeing Michelle Yeoh as Giorgio, diving back into her history and discovery if you've not already seen it. So for me, it was a big win. Your final thoughts?
Yeah, I would give it a solid 2.5, 3. Worth a watch, but just don't get too hung up on it being overly Star Trek.
Okay. I wanted to talk to something else about you while I've got you here, while we've, prized you away from PhD land. And that is a series that we got to watch at the tail end of last year from Apple TV, which is launching very, very soon. It's called Prime Target. It stars the Screen Actors Guild Award winner Leo Woodall, who you might know from The White Lotus, and Quintessa Swindell, who you might know from Black Adam. It's created by the award-winning writer Steve Thompson of Sherlock fame, who is also executive producer. It is launching on Apple TV on the 22nd of January. So actually, as you're listening to this, the first 2 episodes are already out. And then there'll be a new episode weekly every Wednesday through to March the 5th. It's also produced actually by Ridley Scott's Scott Free Productions. Also starring in it, you've got Martha Plimpton, who is a very recognisable face, Stephen Rea and Harry Lloyd. Also, Fra Thee is in this, who is a particularly recognisable face, with little guest appearances by David Morrissey and Jason Fleming. We got to see all 8 episodes of this, so I want to be careful that we don't spoil where it goes, but I really wanted to just take a few minutes to chat about what you thought about this, because sometimes Apple TV shows will fly under the radar and I feel like people don't champion them enough. And actually, this is a show which I really wanted to champion. So what were your thoughts on Prime Time? How much did I tell you before we started watching this about what it was?
Nothing.
So I didn't even say this is a random conspiracy thriller.
Yeah, I mean, I surprisingly really liked it.
Yeah. It's really well acted. It's really well written. It has a strange tone which feels like it's very British, but it's very British with some American sensibilities of storytelling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, there are some classic kind of tropes of American espionage shows which you don't necessarily always get in a British drama that have been kind of ported over into the script that make it quite unique for a British product.
Yeah, I would agree.
What were your kind of highlights of watching this show?
I liked that it went places that sometimes I knew it was coming because it was kind of fit a genre, but there are other points I thought, oh, that's an interesting choice, but I like it.
That's a very interesting point, because this is something I was saying to someone the other day, and I feel like when you do a show like this, because we've all grown up playing Cluedo and watching like espionage thrillers, I feel like you do have to have a certain level of predictability for the audience to buy into watching it. I feel like if it's so complex that the audience has no idea where it's going and doesn't have any suspicions about who might be dodgy or what might be happening, you don't connect with it so much. And I felt like this had, for me, the right balance of cool, I think they're dodgy, I think they could be dodgy, I think they're double crossing, I think it's going here. That I had lots of theories throughout watching all 8 episodes of it, but I wasn't necessarily right with everything that I guessed.
Yeah.
What do you think of the cast? I don't really know Leo Woodall all that much, so this was kind of a first experience for me. And considering he is shouldering most of the narrative alongside Quintessa Swindle, I thought he did a really good job as Edward. What do you think of Edward as a leading man?
I thought he did a very good job. I think the two of them together worked incredibly well. Even though they're very different characters, it worked.
And then I only really know Quintessa Swindle from their work in Black Adam. But as you say, I thought as a pairing, they both work together really, really well. It's a nice scenario that you don't often get where there isn't a romantic dynamic between the two characters. It's simply they want to protect him, he needs protecting, we need to work together. There's this bigger problem going on.
Yeah, they didn't need it. It would just make it pointless. So I liked it they didn't do that.
Yeah. Now, often with this kind of show, people will talk about, I think 8 episodes is too long. It should maybe have been 6, or why isn't it 10? Obviously, you and I both grew up in the age of the 22-episode season. What do you think about the kind of 8 episodes? Was there a point where it felt like it was dragging a little, or did you think it was paced quite well? Because for me personally, I thought it paced really well. And obviously, we were able to binge it because we had all 8 episodes. So it might feel slightly different if you're watching it week by week. But for me personally, I thought it was actually quite exquisitely paced.
I like an 8 episode arc. It was enough. I mean, you could have gotten away with maybe 6, but it might have rushed some of it. But otherwise, I think it was fine.
Now, it's going to be really difficult to talk about the mystery without spoiling anything, which I absolutely do not want to spoil anything at all. What did you think of that core mystery? Because there are some. Would you call it? Are there science fiction elements to it, or is it? I don't quite know how to sort of describe it. It almost defies description in a way because it's quite philosophical and theological, but it is slightly sci-fi at the same time. Give me your thoughts on it.
It's just math, isn't it? It's just.
But then does it take math to a sci-fi place?
I don't think it does. I mean, that's just math in its essence, really. You try to make sense of the world around you, and if that's your view of the world, then you think there's absolutes, and math can do that for you.
Can you really tell you're doing a PhD?
I wouldn't say I was sort of. I'm not going to go into a philosophical worldview, but if that's, some people are working absolutes where there is one reality and it's up to us to make sense of it, and math is a way to make sense of it. Nothing is unpredictable. You can predict it with math. Yeah, what some people would say.
Well, for me, it's and I said this to the PR team when they'd asked me for a few brief thoughts on it. So obviously when I requested for us to get copies of this to be able to watch, there wasn't a trailer. There was a very brief synopsis, which was Prime Target features a brilliant young math postgraduate, Edward Brooks, played by Woodall, who's on the verge of a major breakthrough. If he succeeds in finding a pattern in prime numbers, he will hold the key to every computer in the world. Soon he begins to realise an unseen enemy is trying to destroy his idea before it's even born, which throws him into the orbit of Taylor Sanders, played by Quintessa Swindle, an NSA agent who's been tasked with watching him and reporting on the mathematician's behaviour. Together they start to unravel a troubling conspiracy that Edward is at the heart of. That is all I knew. That and one photo of the two of them was all I had seen. But that kind of conspiracy theory sat so perfectly in my sweet spot of, it might be slightly sci-fi, it's going to go to somewhere weird place, it's got a bit of espionage, I'm fully sold.
Yeah, it's like you've had a bit of Indiana Jones in there with some archaeology. And
yeah, which is where I kind of pull some of the slightly more fantastical elements from.
But I mean, again, that's pretty much, it's fairly sound if you look at math history and where it all comes from. It's that sort of predicting the unpredictable in a way.
And before we do accidentally end up saying something particularly spoilerific, so we're happy with the story, we are happy with the cast. Apple always impresses me with their production values. But then I think this is the first British Apple thing I've watched. I think everything else that I've watched has been that kind of really lush Hollywood production, like a For All Mankind, and I'm trying to think of like the Morning Show, which is really beautifully shot, but again very American. This was the first thing I think I've seen that they've shot in the UK, and I don't know why I would think it would be any different, but I was really impressed by the production values on it as well. Now, obviously, there is a bit of CGI and stuff in there because there are some fairly major moments that happen at the beginning of the season, and there are some things that happen later on which are a bit more bigger in scope. Did you think it was a? Did the production work for you as well?
Yeah, I think there's. I like how it was grounded in Cambridge.
Yep.
And you got that sort of old university, slightly elitist world type view. So I quite like that.
Any downsides to the show whatsoever?
I mean, is there going to be a series two?
That's a very interesting point because this was a series that I came into not thinking that there could be any more to it. But in actual fact, I think it leaves it in a place where I would be quite intrigued to know what happened next.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. And actually, again, if we're trying to not spoil this for you, because as you're listening to this, there are up to 6 more episodes to watch, it does leave it in a really, really great point that it escalates to a wonderful point, which brings it to quite an explosive ending, which is very satisfying, but does leave it in a place where it can continue. Right? Was it a satisfying ending for you?
I was very satisfied.
Very good, very good. What would you score it out of 5?
I'm going to go for a 4.
Oh, I thought you were going to get 5 then. I thought you were 5 out of 5 again. What would make it a 5?
I don't know. Maybe a series 2.
I thought you were going to say if he took his top off.
Well, he does that quite a lot. So.
I also give this a 4 out of 5. I think the only thing that could make it sit in more of a sweet spot for me would be if they pushed the boundaries of the slightly weird sci-fi bits more, which you don't necessarily need to do, and that's a wish list. Other than that, I think it's really well acted, really well made, really well written. So I really implore you to go out and watch it. So you can catch the first 2 episodes on Apple TV now, and the rest of the 8 episodes will roll out every Wednesday between now and March the 5th. I don't know when you're going to hear Boy Wonder on this podcast again, and you probably won't ever see him unless I create some sort of animated avatar, but it was nice to have him back for a little bit anyway. So please do go check out Star Trek Section 31 and also check out Prime Target on Apple TV as well. So as I said, there are 2 episodes which are available now, and then it will be streaming a new episode every week through March I want to say 9th. That could be wrong. There's like 8 episodes, but it's really, really fun. Which just about wraps us up for this week. So thank you so much, Michael, for joining me as co-host with the most.
Thank you.
There was going to be a rhyme in there. It didn't quite work. Hopefully we will get you back on again for something very, very soon. We will find an excuse to bring you back on. In the meantime,
anytime.
I was going to talk about the book that you recently read and have reviewed, but we're not publishing that review for a little while yet. But feel free to tease a little bit what you've been reading.
Oh, so I was sent a preview of a book that comes out in May called Silver Elite by Danny Francis. It is very Hunger Games inspired. It's very dystopian and very political.
I'm sold.
And I think everyone needs to read it. If you're a fan of the Hunger Games, it's a must read. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Is that the first one in a series?
It is in a trilogy.
Okay. Oh, very good. Okay. Amazing. Well, we will be back in just a couple of weeks' time. I was panicking today about what I was going to say as to what we were doing in the next episode. But the really good news is that we're going to be covering at least one of the topics that we're going to be covering is Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is a brand new 10-episode animated series, which is starting on Disney Plus on the 29th of January. So by the time our next episode drops, there will be 2 or 3 episodes out. It's got a bit of a weird release schedule. So there's 2 episodes dropping on the 29th of January. Then there's 3 episodes dropping the week after, 3 episodes again the week after that, and then it ends with 2 episodes on the 19th of Feb. So it's going to all be out within the space of about 4 weeks, but there's 10 episodes. As I am saying these words to you right now, I have already watched the first episode, but it is under embargo. So I won't be saying anything other than I have seen it. But we're going to be covering that. Other than that, it's absolutely, completely and utterly up in the air. I don't know who's going to even be on with me, so it's going to be a massive surprise. But as always, please do like, follow, subscribe on whichever platform you are listening or watching to us on. If you are feeling really kind, then please do also leave us a review because it helps us to find more lovely audience members like you. In the meantime, if you want to find us on social media, we are at Get Your Comic on Instagram and TikTok and Threads and Blue Sky. And on Twitter, because as I keep saying, they went and banned us, we are at Get Your Comic On 1. Gotta put that one in at the end. Um, and you can find me on all social media platforms at Neil Vag. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Digital Spiral and Blue Sky at the Digital God and Blue Sky at the Digital Spiral also.
Oh, I'm totally leaving that in the way that just happened.
Love that.
So until next time, please do stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you very soon. Bye.